I never expected to inherit my father's company at 28. Especially not on the same day I had to identify his body. Maya Patel, right? The detective's voice was gentle but clinical as she slid the photo across the table. Is this your father? That moment froze in time. Dad's face peaceful but unnaturally still. The man who'd called me Little Lioness since I could walk was gone, his heart giving out during his morning run. No warning, no goodbye, just gone. 3 hours. Later, I was sitting in the boardroom of Horizon Solutions, the tech consulting firm my father had built from nothing. His attorney, Mr. Wilson, looked at me with sympathy as he explained that my father's will was clear. As his only child, I inherited his 51% controlling interest in the company. He always intended for you to take over someday, Mr. Wilson said, sliding the paperwork toward me. He just thought he had more time to prepare you. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I was still in shock, mechanically signing documents while wearing the same black dress I'd thrown on that morning when the police called. The weight of what was happening hadn't fully registered. My background was in marketing. I'd deliberately chosen a different path than my father's, working my way up at a competing firm. We'd talked about me joining Horizon someday, but someday was supposed to be years from now. Richard Klein, my father's COO and right-hand man for 15 years, was eyeing me from across the table. I'd known him most of my life. He'd attended my high school graduation, brought me birthday presents. Now his face was unreadable. We should discuss transition plans, he said carefully. Your father's death is unexpected for all of us. That's when reality crashed down on me. Dad was gone. And now I owned a $200 million company with 150 employees who were all looking at me like I was an alien who had just landed in their boardroom. I need time, I whispered, my voice breaking. Just time to process everything. Richard nodded sympathetically. Of course. Take whatever time you need for the funeral arrangements. I can handle things until you're ready. Something in his tone made me pause. It sounded rehearsed, too smooth. But grief was clouding my judgment, so I nodded and let Mr. Wilson drive me home. The next 3 days passed in a blur of funeral preparations, condolence calls, and sleepless nights. I barely had time to think about the company until the evening. Before the funeral, when my phone rang with an unknown number. Maya? It's Zoe from accounting at Horizon. I'm sorry to bother you, but there's something you should know. My stomach tightened. What is it? Richard called an all-hands meeting today. He told everyone you'd be taking a permanent backseat role and that he'd be assuming operational control of the company. Her voice dropped to a whisper. He's already moving into your father's office. The numbness that had enveloped me since finding out about Dad suddenly burned away, replaced by a white-hot anger. He's what? There's more, Zoe continued. He's been meeting with potential buyers. Word is he's planning to sell the company as soon as possible. My father had built Horizon to last generations. He'd refused numerous buyout offers over the years, even when they would have made him much wealthier because he believed in what they were building. The thought of Richard selling it off before Dad was even in the ground made me physically ill. Thank you, Zoe. I'll handle this. I hung up and immediately called Mr. Wilson, who confirmed my worst fears. Richard's been pushing for a sale for years. Your father always refused, but with him gone. I'm still the majority shareholder, I reminded him. Yes, but Richard likely assumes you'll follow his recommendations. Most inheritors do, especially when they have no experience in the industry. But I did have experience. I'd grown up listening to my father talk business strategy at the dinner table. I'd spent summers interning at Horizon before forging my own path. And in my current role, I'd analyzed enough tech consulting firms to know exactly how they operated. Richard had misjudged me. Badly. The next morning, I stood stoically through my father's funeral service, accepting condolences and trying to hold myself together. Richard was there, of course, playing the part of the grieving friend and colleague perfectly. He even had the audacity to tell me, "Don't worry about coming in next week. Take all the time you need." I nodded and thanked him quietly, but inside, I was making plans. Monday morning, I arrived at Horizon Solutions at 7:30 a.m., an hour before most employees. I used my father's key card, which Mr. Wilson had given me, and went straight to what was supposed to be my office, my father's old office. As expected, Richard had already moved in. I stood in the doorway, taking in the changes. My father's collection of vintage typewriters was gone, replaced by Richard's modern art pieces. The family photos, including several of me, had been removed from the credenza. It was as if my father had never existed. I turned and walked to the executive assistant's desk outside. Laura, who had worked with my father for a decade, looked up in surprise. "Maya, we weren't expecting you." "Clearly," I said with a tight smile. "Could you please call an emergency board meeting for 9 a.m. sharp? And an all-hands company meeting at 11? Her eyes widened, but she nodded and reached for the phone. By 8:45, Richard had arrived, storming toward what he now considered his office. He stopped short when he saw me sitting in the reception area, dressed in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, my father's vintage watch on my wrist. "Maya," he said, recovering quickly. "This is a surprise. I thought we agreed you'd take some time." "Did we?" I interrupted, standing to meet his gaze. "Or did you assume I would?" His smile faltered slightly. "I was just trying to give you space to grieve." How thoughtful. And moving into my father's office, was that also for my benefit? Before he could answer, Laura announced that the boardroom was ready. Richard's face darkened as he realized what was happening, but he maintained his composure as we walked toward the meeting. The board members were already seated when we arrived. Most were longtime friends of my father, though 2 had been brought in by Richard in recent years. All looked surprised to see me. "Gentlemen, ladies," I said, taking the seat at the head of the table, my father's seat. "Thank you for accommodating this last-minute meeting." Richard remained standing. "Maya, while I appreciate your enthusiasm, this isn't necessary today. We can ease you into—" "I'm not here to be eased into anything, Richard," I said calmly. "I'm here because I've learned you're planning to sell my father's company without consulting me, the majority shareholder." The room fell silent. Several board members glanced between us, clearly uncomfortable. Richard recovered quickly. "That's a misunderstanding. I've merely been exploring options to present to you, as any responsible COO would do. Including moving into the CEO's office and telling staff I'd be taking a permanent back seat?" His face flushed. "Maya, you have no experience running a company of this size. Your father wouldn't want—" "Don't." I cut him off, my voice deadly. Don't you dare tell me what my father would want." I placed a folder on the table and slid copies to each board member. "This is my proposed transition plan. Over the next 30 days, I'll be working directly with each department head to understand current operations. During that time, I'll be assuming the role of acting president while we conduct a proper search for a permanent CEO." Richard's laugh was condescending. "You can't be serious." I met his gaze steadily. Deadly serious. He leaned forward, placing his hands on the table. "Maya, be reasonable. The clients trust me. The team trusts me. If you force this issue—" He paused dramatically. "If you insist on being president, the entire executive team will resign. We've already discussed it." The threat hung in the air, his confidence absolute. But there was something he didn't know. Something Zoe had told me during a follow-up call yesterday. I smiled, and for the first time since my father died, it felt genuine. "Is that so?" I picked up my phone. "Laura, please send them in." The boardroom door opened and 5 people walked in: the CFO, CTO, and 3 senior vice presidents, the core of Horizon's leadership team, and none of them looked happy with Richard. "I believe you were about to tender some resignations," I said. The look on Richard's face was worth photographing, shock melting into fury as he realized he'd been outmaneuvered. "What is this?" he demanded, glaring at his supposed allies. Vanessa Chen, our CFO, stepped forward. "We've had concerns about your leadership approach for months, Richard. Raj and I have repeatedly questioned your aggressive cost-cutting at the expense of quality." Raj Mehta, our brilliant CTO, nodded. "And your plan to sell to Globotech would dismantle everything we've built. Their acquisition history is clear: strip valuable assets, lay off most staff, and absorb client lists." Richard's face reddened. "This is absurd. You can't possibly think she's qualified. She has an MBA from Wharton and runs competitor analysis at Rivera Partners," Vanessa interrupted. "She literally gets paid to understand companies like ours." The boardroom fell silent, as all eyes turned to me. Time to lay my cards on the table. I've spent the last 48 hours reviewing our financials, client portfolio, and strategic plan, I said, sliding another document across the table. "I've identified 3 major issues requiring immediate attention." I pointed to the first page. "Our client concentration is dangerous, 40% of revenue from 2 accounts. We need diversification." Flipping to the next page. "Second, our innovation pipeline has stagnated. We've launched no new services in 18 months while competitors have expanded." Richard scoffed. "That's because your father was too conservative." "My father," I cut in, voice steady but ice cold, "understood that innovation requires investment, not just cost-cutting to improve quarterly numbers for a potential sale." I felt the ghost of my father beside me as I continued. "Which brings me to point 3. Richard has been systematically undermining our long-term sustainability for short-term gains. The proof is in these reports." I distributed another set of documents showing how Richard had redirected R&D funds, cut staff development programs, and neglected client relationship management, all while positioning himself for a lucrative payout from a sale. "This isn't what my father built," I said, emotion finally breaking through my professional veneer. "And it's not what I inherited." The board chair, Eleanor Blackwell, who'd been silent until now, leaned forward. "What exactly are you proposing, Maya?" I took a deep breath. "I move that we terminate Richard's employment, effective immediately, and that I step in as acting president while we stabilize operations." Eleanor glanced around the table. "All in favor?" One by one, hands went up, every board member except for Richard's 2 additions, who exchanged nervous glances. "The motion passes," Eleanor announced with quiet authority. Richard shot to his feet. "This is a mistake you'll regret. I built relationships with our key clients for 15 years. When they hear about this, they'll hear that we're recommitting to quality and innovation," I finished for him. "Security will escort you to clear your things from my father's office." As if on cue, 2 security guards appeared at the door. Richard's eyes narrowed. "Your father would be disappointed in you." The words were meant to cut deep, but instead, they crystallized my resolve. I rose to meet his gaze. "No, Richard. My father would recognize what you became. Someone who forgot that Horizon was built on relationships and trust, not spreadsheets and self-interest." After he was escorted out, the room remained quiet. Reality crashed down on me. I'd just fired my father's right-hand man and taken control of a $200 million company. My hands trembled slightly, but I couldn't let them see that. Eleanor broke the silence. "Well, Madam President, you have 30 minutes before addressing the entire company. What's your plan?" Suddenly, Everything felt too real, too heavy. But I couldn't falter now. First, I said, gathering my notes, I need coffee. And second, I need Vanessa and Raj to walk me through our client calls scheduled for today. The room relaxed slightly, a few smiles appearing. Eleanor nodded approvingly. Your father always said you had his backbone. Now I see it. As the board members filed out, Zoe from accounting lingered behind. Thank you for the warning, I told her quietly. You risked a lot. She shook her head. Your father saved my job when Richard wanted to outsource the entire accounting department last year. Said numbers weren't just figures on a page but the story of people's work. Her eyes grew misty. He was a good man. Yes, I whispered. He was. The all-hands meeting was a blur. Standing on the same stage where my father had given countless company updates, I felt both like an imposter and exactly where I belonged. Hundreds of faces looked up at me, some curious, others concerned, many hopeful. Most of you have known me as Nikhil Patel's daughter. I began, my voice stronger than I felt. Today, I'm here as the acting president of Horizon Solutions. This isn't how any of us planned for leadership transition to happen. I paused, letting my gaze travel across the room. My father built Horizon on 3 principles: innovation that solves real problems, relationships that last generations, and integrity in all decisions. Recently, we've drifted from these foundations. The room was utterly silent. As of this morning, Richard Klein is no longer with the company. A ripple of whispers spread through the crowd. I held up my hand. I know this creates uncertainty. Change always does. But I'm not here to dismantle what my father built. I'm here to honor it by returning to our core values. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. As I outlined my immediate plans, meeting with each department, reviewing our project portfolio, and reassuring key clients, I spotted familiar faces in the crowd. Veterans who'd worked with my father from the beginning. New hires still learning our culture. Mid-level managers trying to gauge what this meant for their teams. I don't have all the answers yet, I admitted. But I do know this. Horizon isn't for sale. Not now, not ever, as long as I have a say. The applause started slowly, then built into something that made my chest tighten with emotion. Afterward, I retreated to my office, where Laura had already removed Richard's belongings and restored my father's collection of vintage typewriters. On the desk sat a single envelope with my name handwritten in my father's bold script. My hands shook as I opened it. The letter was dated just 3 weeks earlier. My little lioness, it began, and I had to sit down, tears blurring the words. If you're reading this, then life has taken an unexpected turn. I've always believed in preparing for contingencies. It's what made me a good businessman. But being your father made me a better man. I wiped my eyes and continued reading. You'll face challenges taking over Horizon. Some will underestimate you because of your youth or gender. Others will resist change simply because it's change. Trust your instincts. You have good ones. His words steadied me, even as they broke my heart all over again. Watch out for Richard. He's brilliant, but ambitious to a fault. He never understood that Horizon isn't just a business. It's a legacy of relationships. You've always understood that instinctively. The letter continued with specific advice about clients and ongoing projects, but it was the final paragraph that lodged in my throat. I've never told you this, but the day you were born, I held you in my arms and promised that everything I built would be a foundation for you to build something even greater. Not because I expected you to follow in my footsteps, but because I knew whatever path you chose, you would walk it with courage. I am profoundly proud of the woman you've become. Lead with compassion, decide with conviction, and remember, I'm always with you. All my love, Dad. A knock at the door pulled me from my grief. Laura stood there with Vanessa and Raj. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said gently, "but Alcorn Technologies is on the line. They heard about the leadership change and want to speak directly with you. Alcorn was our biggest client, the one Richard had been certain would leave without him." I tucked my father's letter into my jacket pocket, right over my heart. "Put them through," I said, straightening my shoulders. I could feel my father's watch on my wrist, its familiar weight a reminder of time passing and promises to keep. As I picked up the phone, I realized something important. I wasn't just preserving my father's legacy now, I was beginning my own. The call with Alcorn Technologies went nothing like I expected. "Ms. Patel, this is James Alcorn," came the gravelly voice I recognized from company events. "I was sorry to hear about your father. He was a man of exceptional character." "Thank you, Mr. Alcorn. He spoke highly of you as well." "Well, I'll be direct. Richard Klein called me this morning with quite a tale. Says you staged a corporate coup and that we should reconsider our relationship with Horizon." My stomach dropped, but I kept my voice steady. "And what are your thoughts on that?" There was a pause, then a surprising chuckle. "My thoughts are that Nikhil trained you well. Richard never understood why we chose Horizon over larger competitors. It wasn't his slick presentations. It was your father's integrity." I exhaled slowly. "That means a lot, Mr. Alcorn. Call me James. And while I have you, I'd like to discuss expanding our contract. We've been holding back a new initiative because, frankly, Richard seemed more interested in selling your company than growing it. By the time we finished, Alcorn had not only committed to staying, but had proposed a 30% increase in services." As I hung up, Vanessa and Raj exchanged looks of shock. "That's unprecedented," Vanessa said. "Alcorn is notoriously conservative with vendor relationships." I slid my father's letter across the desk. "Read the PS." Raj picked it up, finding a handwritten note at the bottom of the page. "James Alcorn has been waiting for leadership he trusts to launch their Southeast Asia expansion. The proposal is in my personal safe. Code is your birthday." "Your father was always 3 steps ahead," Raj said, shaking his head in amazement. The respite was brief. Laura appeared in the doorway again, her expression grim. "Richard's 2 board allies are calling for an emergency shareholder meeting. They're challenging your appointment." The next 48 hours became a blur of legal consultations, client calls, and strategy sessions. Richard had moved quickly, contacting not just clients but also our minority shareholders, painting me as an inexperienced usurper who would drive the company into the ground. Mr. Wilson, my father's attorney, reassured me. "Your 51% makes this legally straightforward, but you need to win the confidence battle too." He was right. Numbers on paper wouldn't matter if the company lost faith. By Wednesday afternoon, just 3 days after taking over, I received word that Richard had scheduled a town hall with our senior management for Friday, promising to restore stability to Horizon. "He can't access the building," I said to Vanessa. As we reviewed the situation, "No, but he's rented space across the street and invited every manager. His email suggests attendance is career critical." The implied threat was clear: side with me, and if Richard somehow regained control, your job was gone. That night, I sat alone in my father's home office, surrounded by photographs and mementos of his life. A life cut short, with so much wisdom left unshared. I picked up his favorite fountain pen, the weight of it in my hand a poor substitute for his guidance. "What would you do, Dad?" I whispered to the empty room. The answer came not in words, but in memory, a summer afternoon when I was 12, hovering in his office doorway as he finished a difficult call. "Maya, come in," he'd said, noticing me. "You look troubled." I'd explained how a girl at school had been spreading rumors about me, trying to turn my friends against me. Instead of dismissing my adolescent drama, my father had set aside his work. "When someone attacks you publicly, you have 3 options," You can hide and hope it blows over. You can attack back with equal venom. Or you can stand in your truth so firmly that their accusations look small by comparison. He'd leaned forward then, his eyes intent. The first shows weakness. The second makes you just like them. Only the third preserves both your position and your integrity. The memory crystallized into clarity. Richard was expecting me to either ignore his meeting or try to prevent it. Either would play into his narrative. I needed a third option. Thursday morning, I called an emergency meeting with our department heads. When they assembled, uncertainty hung heavy in the air. I know about Richard's meeting tomorrow, I said without preamble. And I know many of you feel caught in the middle. Nervous glances circulated around the table. I'm not here to demand loyalty or threaten consequences. I'm here to show you what I'm fighting for, and to ask for your help. For the next 2 hours, I walked them through my vision for Horizon. Not just abstract principles, but concrete plans. The innovation initiatives we'd launch, the client relationships we'd deepen, the company culture we'd strengthen. By the time I finished, the mood had shifted. Questions flowed, not defensive, but genuinely engaged. Ideas built upon ideas. For the first time since my father's death, I felt the company coming alive around me. As the meeting concluded, David from sales, one of our most respected veterans, spoke up. What do you want us to do about tomorrow? Every eye in the room turned to me. This was the moment that would define my leadership. Go to Richard's meeting, I said, drawing surprised looks. Listen to what he has to say. Ask hard questions, then make your own decisions based on what you believe is best for Horizon. I stood, gathering my notes. I trust you all to recognize truth when you hear it. I'm betting my future on that. As they filed out, several lingered to speak privately. By day's end, I had a clearer picture of who stood where, and the realization that while I had significant support, some key managers remained on the fence. That night, as I prepared for whatever the next day would bring, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Eleanor Blackwell, our board chair, standing on my porch. May I come in? She asked, her elegant demeanor unchanged despite the late hour. Over tea at my kitchen table, she studied me with the same penetrating gaze that had intimidated Wall Street executives for decades. You're very much like him, you know, she said, finally. Not in the obvious ways people might expect, but in the ways that matter. I'm trying to be, I admitted. No. She shook her head firmly. Don't try to be Nikhil. Be Maya. That's who this company needs now. She reached into her handbag and withdrew a folder. Richard approached me privately yesterday with an offer. If I support his return, he'll guarantee me a significant payout when the company sells. My heart sank. Eleanor's influence with the board was substantial. If she switched sides, what? Did you tell him? I asked, hating the tremor in my voice. I told him I'd think about it. Her expression remained impassive. And I have. She slid the folder across the table. Inside was detailed documentation of Richard's activities over the past year, altered board minutes, hidden communications with potential buyers, and most damning, evidence he'd diverted company resources to set up his next venture. You get this? I've been watching him for months. Your father and I had concerns. He asked me to keep this private unless absolutely necessary. Her eyes held mine. I believe it's necessary now. Eleanor rose to leave, but paused at the door. Richard's gambit tomorrow isn't just about convincing managers. He's bringing Globotech's CEO to announce their intent to acquire Horizon, pending what he calls a correction in leadership. My mind raced. That's why he's so confident. He's promising everyone job security through the transition. Precisely. She raised an eyebrow. The question is, what will you do about it? After she left, I spent hours reviewing the documents she'd provided. By dawn, I had my answer. Friday morning arrived with a knot in my stomach. Richard's meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. at the conference center across from our offices. At 8:30, I took a deep breath and stepped into the elevator, not heading down to a waiting car as my team expected, but up to the rooftop garden my father had installed last year. There, with the morning sun warming my face, I made a call to someone Richard never would have considered an ally, his ex-wife. Diane Klein agreed to meet me within 15 minutes of my call. When she arrived at the rooftop garden, her designer heels clicking against the stone pavers, I understood immediately why my father had always spoken of her with respect, despite her divorce from Richard. "I brought what you asked for," she said, handing me a sleek external hard drive. Richard never was careful about his passwords, especially after a few drinks. The data she'd extracted from their home computer before their divorce finalized last year was damning. Emails detailing how Richard had been secretly negotiating with Globotech for over a year, offering proprietary client information as bait while planning his own golden parachute. "Why help me?" I asked as we stood beside the lavender plants my father had insisted on including in the garden design. "You don't know me." Diane's perfectly manicured hand brushed against the purple blooms. "Your father came to my mother's funeral when Richard was too busy. He sent my daughter a graduation gift with a handwritten note." Her gaze hardened. "And when Richard left me for his assistant, Nikhil was the only one from the company who didn't pretend not to notice me at industry events." She checked her watch, a rival to my father's vintage piece in both elegance and cost. "Richard's meeting starts in 20 minutes. What's your plan?" I gestured to my marketing director, who'd been waiting discreetly by the rooftop entrance. "We're going to give him exactly what he wants, an audience." At precisely 9:05 a.m., I walked into the conference center where Richard's meeting was already underway. The room fell silent as I moved confidently down the center aisle, Vanessa and Raj flanking me. Richard recovered quickly, his smile tight. "Maya, this is unexpected. We were just discussing Horizon's future." "I know exactly what you were discussing," I replied, my voice carrying easily through the hushed room. I turned to face the crowd, nearly 40 of our managers and senior staff, plus a gray-haired man I recognized as Globotech's CEO. For those who don't know me well, I'll be direct. I don't play games, I don't make threats, and I don't hide behind proxies. I nodded toward Richard. "Unlike some," Richard's smile vanished. "If you're here to disrupt—" "I'm here to save everyone time," I interrupted, turning to Globotech's CEO. "Mr. Prescott, I understand you're interested in acquiring Horizon Solutions." The older man nodded cautiously. "We see significant synergies between our organizations." "Then you should know that any acquisition would require my approval as majority shareholder, which I have no intention of giving." I held his gaze. "But more importantly, you should know what Richard has been hiding from both of us." I nodded. To Raj, who connected his tablet to the room's projection system. On the screen appeared Richard's confidential communications, not just with Globotech, but with 3 of their competitors, each containing slightly different versions of Horizon's proprietary client data. "Richard hasn't been negotiating a merger," I said as the evidence scrolled across the screen. "He's been shopping an auction, using our intellectual property as the merchandise." The room erupted. Mr. Prescott's face flushed dark red as he turned to confront Richard, who was already backing toward the exit. "This is fabricated," Richard stammered. "She's desperate." "The metadata is intact and verifiable," Raj stated, flatly. "And we've already shared this with our legal team." As security personnel appeared at the doors, not Horizon's, but the conference centers, I addressed our gathered staff. "I didn't come here to humiliate Richard. I came because you deserve to know the truth before making decisions about your futures." I surveyed the room, meeting the eyes of those who'd been wavering. Horizon isn't for sale. Not to Globotech. Not to anyone. What my father built will grow together, As Richard was escorted out, still protesting, Mr. Prescott approached me. "Your father turned down our acquisition offer 3 times," he said grudgingly. "Said the company wasn't just assets on a balance sheet. I see he passed that stubborn streak to you." "Among other things," I replied. "Though I prefer to call it conviction." He handed me his business card. "When you're ready to have a legitimate conversation about Horizon's future, call me. The offer stands." I took the card and deliberately tucked it into my jacket pocket. "I appreciate that, Mr. Prescott, but Horizon's future isn't about being absorbed. It's about becoming what my father always envisioned." As our team filed out of the conference room, many approached me with handshakes, nods of respect, or simply relieved smiles. David from sales clapped me on the shoulder. "That," he said with a grin, "was pure Nikhil Patel, except he would have worn a better tie." For the first time in days, I laughed. Back at Horizon's offices, chaos had transformed into cautious optimism. By noon, news of Richard's spectacular downfall had spread throughout the company. His 2 board allies had tendered their resignations, saving us the trouble of removing them. In the afternoon, I met with each department, not to make grand pronouncements, but to listen. What challenges were they facing? What opportunities did they see? What had frustrated them under the previous leadership? The patterns were clear. Richard had been running Horizon like a company preparing for sale, cutting corners, focusing on metrics that would attract buyers rather than build sustainable growth, and silencing innovation that wouldn't immediately improve the bottom line. By evening, exhaustion hit me like a physical blow. After everyone had left, I sat alone in my father's chair, staring at his collection of typewriters. Each one represented a story he'd told me, about business deals struck, lessons learned, principles maintained. The oldest typewriter, a 1923 Underwood, had been his first acquisition. "Remember, Maya," he'd said, "this machine changed the world. Because it made communication more accessible. That's what good business does. It democratizes value." Lost in memory, I almost missed the soft knock at my door. Laura stood there, coat already on. "You should go home," she said gently. "It's been a long week." "In a minute," I promised. "I just need to finish something." After she left, I opened my laptop and began typing an email to the entire company. Not a grand manifesto, but a simple acknowledgement of where we stood. "This week has been difficult for all of us," I wrote. "Change always is, especially when it comes without warning or preparation. I want to thank each of you for your patience, your professionalism, and your commitment to what Horizon can be." Monday morning, we begin the next chapter. I don't have all the answers, and I won't pretend to. What I have is a vision, inherited from my father, but shaped by my own experiences and strengthened by your collective wisdom. Horizon was built to solve real problems for real clients, to create lasting value rather than temporary gains, and to be a place where exceptional people do exceptional work. Those fundamentals haven't changed. My door is always open. My mind is always listening, and my commitment is unwavering. See you Monday. Maya Patel, President, Horizon Solutions. I hit send, shut down my computer, and finally left the office. The security guard nodded as I passed through the lobby. "Working late, Ms. Patel?" "Just finishing something important, Carlos." I paused. "You knew my father well, didn't you?" He'd been with the company since the beginning, when our offices occupied half a floor in a rundown building across town. 16 years, he confirmed. He never passed by without stopping to talk. Asked about my kids by name, remembered when my wife was sick. His eyes crinkled. Man knew how to make people feel seen. "That's a rare gift," I said softly. "Seems to run in the family," Carlos replied, holding the door for me. "Have a good weekend, Ms. Patel." I stepped into the cool evening air, realizing it was the first time I'd been outside all day. The weekend stretched before me, not for rest, but for preparation. Monday would come quickly, bringing with it the real test of my leadership. My phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. Alcorn called. Contract expansion approved. We're meeting their team Wednesday. One small victory. We'd need many more at my father's house. Now my house, though it still felt strange to think of it that way. I kicked off my heels and wandered into the kitchen. The refrigerator was nearly empty, save for condiments and a bottle of champagne my father had been saving for some forgotten special occasion. On impulse, I grabbed the bottle and a single glass, then carried them out to the back patio where my father had spent countless evenings unwinding after work. The garden lights came on automatically as darkness fell, illuminating the carefully tended flower beds my mother had designed before cancer took her when I was 10. Popping the cork, I poured a measure of champagne and raised it to the star-scattered sky. "I'm trying, Dad," I whispered. "I hope I'm getting it right." The breeze rustled through the maple trees at the edge of the property, almost like a response. I took a sip of champagne and let myself fully feel, for the first time, the magnitude of what had happened. My father was gone. His company was now mine. People's livelihoods depended on decisions I would make. The weight of it all pressed down, threatening to overwhelm me, until my phone lit up with another notification. An employee had responded to my email. "Ms. Patel, I never met your father, but in my 6 months at Horizon, I've heard countless stories about his integrity and vision. This week, watching you fight for the company he built, I understood why people speak of him with such respect. If the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, we're in good hands. Looking forward to Monday." It was signed by someone in our junior developer team, someone I hadn't even met yet. More messages followed, a trickle becoming a stream. Not all were as effusive, but each represented a small vote of confidence, a willingness to give me a chance. Setting down my glass, I scrolled. Through them, a sense of purpose gradually replacing my fatigue. This wasn't just about preserving my father's legacy or proving Richard wrong. It was about honoring the trust these people were cautiously placing in me. Trust I hadn't yet earned, but would work every day to deserve. In that moment, on my father's patio with his champagne, and under the same stars he'd contemplated during his own moments of doubt, I made a silent promise. To the company, to my father's memory, and to myself. Horizon wouldn't just survive this transition. It would emerge stronger. Monday arrived with unexpected momentum. When I walked through Horizon's doors at 7:15 a.m., I found the office already humming with activity. Teams huddled around whiteboards, the development floor was buzzing with energy, and the strategy room was filled with senior staff reviewing client portfolios. "What's happening?" I asked Laura, who met me with a steaming mug of coffee. Black, no sugar, just like my father's. "Your email Friday night," she explained. "People took it as permission to restart projects Richard had shelved." I wandered through the departments, observing without interrupting. In the UX design lab, I spotted storyboards for a client interface overhaul that had been tabled months ago. The analytics team was refining a predictive model that Richard had deemed unnecessarily innovative. Even the office manager was coordinating the return of our monthly culture lunches. The company wasn't waiting for my direction. It was reclaiming its identity. At our 9 a.m. executive meeting, the energy was electric. Department heads arrived with initiatives already in motion, seeking alignment rather than permission. For 2 hours, we synchronized priorities, identified resource needs, and established clear communication channels. Vanessa presented updated financial projections that made everyone sit straighter. Without the cost-cutting measures Richard insisted on, our margins will temporarily decrease, she acknowledged. But our projected client retention improves by 22%, and our 3-year growth trajectory steepens significantly. Raj followed with a technology roadmap that would position Horizon ahead of emerging market trends. We've been playing it too safe. These innovations require investment, but they'll differentiate us from competitors still offering last-generation solutions. As the meeting concluded, I felt a strange sense of déjà vu. This was exactly how my father had run Horizon, enabling talented people to excel rather than controlling their every move. One last thing, I said as everyone gathered their materials. I need recommendations for 2 new board members to replace Richard's allies. I want people who understand our culture but will challenge our thinking. Back in my office, I found a small package on my desk. Inside was a lapel pin, a tiny golden lion. The note simply read, "For the Lioness, we believe in you. HR team." I pinned it to my blazer, touched by the gesture and the subtle acknowledgement of my father's nickname for me. The morning's momentum continued until noon, when Laura appeared at my door, her expression tense. "Maya, there's something you should see." She handed me her tablet, open to a financial news site. The headline made my blood run cold. Klein Consulting launches with exodus from Horizon Solutions. The FISOM article detailed how Richard had established a new firm and recruited 15 Horizon employees, including 2 senior project managers and our director of client services. They were targeting our client base, specifically the medium-sized accounts that made up the backbone of our business. They resigned this morning, Laura confirmed. Coordinated departures, all citing confidence in Richard's leadership as their reason. I scanned the article again, noting Richard's quoted promise to maintain the high standards and client relationships that have been neglected under recent management changes. The implied attack was clear. He was painting me as the disruptor, himself as the steady hand, and poaching both talent and clients in the process. "Call Raj and Vanessa," I said, handing back the tablet. "We need a response plan immediately." Within 30 minutes, my office had transformed into a war room. Raj's team was securing our systems against data exfiltration. Vanessa was contacting affected clients. Our legal counsel was reviewing non-compete clauses, and I was drafting a company-wide communication addressing the departures directly. "We can't pretend this isn't happening," I told the team. Transparency builds trust. By 2 p.m., we'd confirmed that Richard had been planning this move for weeks. The timing, immediately after his failed coup attempt, was opportunistic, but the groundwork had been laid well in advance. He specifically targeted accounts he personally managed, Vanessa reported. These 15 people serviced clients representing about 18% of our annual revenue. The number hit like a physical blow. Losing that much business would force significant cutbacks, exactly the scenario I'd promised to avoid. "Maya, we need to make calls," Raj urged. "Today, before Richard reaches. These clients with his version of events." I nodded, already reaching for my phone when Laura appeared again. "I have Diane Klein on line 1. Confused, I took the call. "Diane?" "Check your email," she said without preamble. "Richard made a mistake." In my inbox was a forwarded message, an email Richard had accidentally sent to his ex-wife's address instead of his new girlfriend's, who apparently had a similar name. The message contained his detailed strategy for targeting Horizon's clients, complete with proprietary information he'd taken before his termination. "This is a clear violation of his separation agreement," our legal counsel confirmed. "We can file for an immediate injunction." The opportunity granted temporary relief, but I knew legal maneuvers wouldn't solve the underlying problem. Richard understood our clients' needs and had built personal relationships with key decision-makers. Those connections couldn't be legally prohibited. As the team dispersed to execute our containment strategy, I remained at my desk, staring at the framed photo of my father that I'd placed there that morning. It showed him at Horizon's 10th anniversary celebration, surrounded by employees, his face alight with pride. "What would you do?" I whispered. The answer came from an unexpected source. David from sales appeared in my doorway, his expression grim but determined. I heard about the defections, he said. The sales team is concerned. As they should be, I acknowledged. He entered, closing the door behind him. You're focusing on the wrong thing. Excuse me? Richard took 15 people. That leaves 135 who stayed, David said bluntly. They stayed because they believe in what Horizon stands for, or at least what it used to stand for before Richard started changing things. He leaned forward, his veteran salesman's intensity focused entirely on me. Stop playing defense. Your father never would have. The words struck home. Dad had built Horizon by anticipating market shifts, not reacting to competitors. When challenges arose, he'd always found a way to transform them into opportunities. What exactly are you suggesting? I asked. David's smile was wolfish. Richard thinks he knows our clients better than anyone, but there's something he's overlooked. By 4 p.m., we'd pivoted completely. Instead of defensive calls reassuring clients about the disruption, we launched a proactive campaign unveiling Horizon's Next Chapter initiative. Every client, not just those at risk, received a personal call from a senior team member introducing enhanced service packages tailored to needs Richard had consistently overlooked. For TUS, our technology clients, we offered advanced data analytics that Richard had deemed unnecessary expenses. For our healthcare accounts, we introduced specialized compliance support that he'd considered low-margin activities. For financial services clients, we unveiled the cybersecurity framework he'd repeatedly delayed. We weren't just preventing defections, we were catalyzing growth. I personally called our 10 largest accounts, including James Alcorn. We've identified significant opportunities that have been overlooked, I explained. Not because we lacked capability, but because we lacked proper focus on your specific industry challenges. The response was overwhelmingly positive. By day's end, we'd not only secured commitments from most at-risk clients, but had expanded services with 4 major accounts. As the office gradually emptied, the crisis team remained, refining our strategy for the coming days. Around 8 p.m., Vanessa brought in takeout for those still working. Preliminary numbers, she announced, distributing containers of Thai food. We're projecting to retain 85% of the at-risk revenue and offset the rest with service expansions within 90 days. Relief washed through the room. We weren't just surviving Richard's attack, we were transforming it into fuel for growth. As we ate, conversation shifted from crisis management to longer-term vision. For the first time, I felt genuinely comfortable in my role, not just as Nikhil Patel's daughter, but as Horizon's president. We should formalize the Innovation Lab concept, I suggested, picking at my pad tie. Create dedicated time for teams to develop solutions to emerging client challenges. Raj's eyes lit up. I've been advocating for that for years. Richard always... We're not going to define ourselves by what Richard would or wouldn't do, I interrupted gently. Let's focus on what Horizon can become. The conversation flowed freely after that, ideas building upon ideas. By the time we wrapped up, it was nearly midnight, but the energy in the room remained high. As the last team members departed, Laura lingered, helping me gather the scattered notes and food containers. Your father would work late like this, she said, a smile playing at her lips. But he'd always make sure everyone else went home to their families first. I remember, I said softly. He'd call Mom to say he'd be late, and she'd put me on the phone to say goodnight? Laura nodded. After she passed, he'd still call your grandmother's house where you were staying, every night without fail. The simple memory brought unexpected tears to my eyes. I turned away, busying myself with organizing papers. He wasn't perfect, Laura continued, her voice gentle. He made mistakes, had regrets, especially about work-life balance after your mother died. I looked up, surprised by her candor. What I'm saying, Maya, is that you don't have to be him. You can learn from both his successes and his regrets." As she left, her words echoed in my mind. I'd been so focused on preserving my father's legacy that I hadn't fully considered how I might build upon it, improving not just the company he'd created, but the life he'd lived. The next morning, I arrived at the office to find an urgent message. Waiting. James Alcorn wanted to meet, not just with me, but with Richard Klein. He's requested a meeting with both of you to discuss Horizon's future and his account, Laura explained. Today at noon, his office. My stomach tightened. Alcorn represented over 20% of our business. If he was considering dividing his business between us and Richard's new firm, it would be devastating. Did he say anything else? I asked. Laura shook her head. Just that attendance was non-negotiable if we valued his business. I spent the morning preparing, reviewing Alcorn's account history and the expansion proposals we'd discussed. At 11:30, I left for his downtown office, uncertainty churning in my stomach. In the sleek reception area of Alcorn Technologies, I found Richard already waiting, his expression smug. "Maya," he acknowledged coolly. "Surprised to see me?" "Not at all," I replied, matching his tone. "I expected you'd try to poach our largest client." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "It's not poaching if the client prefers superior service." Before I could respond, James Alcorn's assistant appeared. "Mr. Alcorn will see you both now." We followed her into a massive corner office where Alcorn sat behind an imposing mahogany desk. The wall behind him was glass, offering a panoramic view of the city skyline, including, I realized with a start, Horizon's offices in the distance. "Richard. Maya." He nodded to each of us in turn. "Thank you for coming on such short notice." He pushed a folder across the desk. "This contains my company's 5-year strategic plan. It represents over $50 million in potential consulting services." His gaze hardened. "Services I will entrust to one firm, not two. I have no interest in dividing my business or managing multiple consulting relationships." Richard and I both reached for the folder. Alcorn raised his hand, stopping us. "Before either of you makes your case, I want to be clear. This isn't about technical capabilities. Both of you could handle the work." He leaned back in his chair. "This is about trust." His eyes fixed on Richard. "You've called me 6 times in 2 days, promising continuity and special attention if I move my business to your new firm." Then he turned to me. "And you've called once, not to defend against his overtures, but to propose innovations my team has been requesting for months." The room fell silent except for the distant hum of the city below. "So," Alcorn continued, "I've made my decision." The tension was electric as he reached for the folder and handed it definitively to one of us. The folder landed in my hands, heavier than its physical weight suggested. "Ms. Patel has demonstrated something I value above expertise," Alcorn said, his eyes still on Richard. "The capacity to listen rather than just respond." Richard's face, contorted, the veneer of professional composure cracking. "James, we've worked together for 15 years. You can't seriously— 14 years, Alcorn corrected coldly. "And in that time, you've ignored 7 major innovation proposals from my team because they didn't fit your standardized service model." He turned to me. "When Maya called yesterday, she mentioned our Asia-Pacific expansion plans before I did. Apparently, Nikhil had been preparing for it." The realization struck me like lightning. The proposal in my father's safe wasn't just a document. It was the culmination of conversations and observations he'd been collecting for years. "Your father understood my business challenges before I articulated them," Alcorn continued. "That's the difference between a vendor and a partner." Richard stood abruptly. "This isn't over. Not by a long shot." As the door slammed behind him, Alcorn's stern expression softened slightly. "He'll be on the phone with every one of your clients by end of day." "Probably," I acknowledged, my fingers tracing the edge of the folder. But they'll be hearing from us too. On the elevator down, my composure finally fractured. I leaned against the wall, eyes closed, letting the victory and relief wash over me. Alcorn's business alone would offset most of the accounts Richard might steal. Outside the building, I spotted Richard across the street, arguing heatedly on his phone. Our eyes met briefly, his narrowed with hatred, mine steady. The man who'd threatened my leadership, who'd claimed everyone would quit under me, was now scrambling to salvage his own credibility. When I returned to Horizon, the news had somehow preceded me. Spontaneous applause broke out as I crossed the lobby, not orchestrated celebration, but genuine relief from a team that had been holding its collective breath. "I need the executive team in the conference room," I told Laura, fighting back unexpected tears. "And find out who sent Alcorn our Asia-Pacific proposal yesterday." In the momentary solitude of the elevator, I pulled out my father's watch, running my thumb over its weathered face. "Thanks, Dad," I whispered. The next week blurred into a relentless rhythm of client calls, strategy sessions, and team rebuilds. Richard had inflicted damage. We lost 12 clients despite our best efforts. But Alcorn's expanded business cushioned the blow. More importantly, the company culture transformed. People who had worked silently under Richard's regime now approached me with ideas, concerns, even criticisms. Every conversation reinforced what my father had understood. Horizon's true value wasn't its client list or methodologies, but the collective intelligence of people who believed in its mission. Friday evening found me still at my desk, reviewing candidates for our open director positions. A light knock interrupted my concentration. "You missed dinner again," said a familiar voice. I looked up to find my grandmother in the doorway, a container of homemade food in her hands and concern in her eyes. At 78, Nani still moved with the graceful dignity that had carried her through immigration from India, the early struggling years in America, my mother's death, and now my father's. "I'm sorry," I said, taking off my reading glasses. "Time got away from me." She set the container on my desk, then pulled up a chair. "That's what your father always said." I winced. "I know. I'm turning into him." "No." Her voice was gentle but firm. "You're becoming yourself, but you're making his mistakes along the way." The simple truth of her words stung. I'd been so focused on saving the company that I'd barely been back to my own apartment, hadn't called friends, had forgotten. "My cousin's birthday? After your mother died," Nani continued. "Your father poured himself into work. Not just from grief, though that was part of it. He thought success would create security. For the company, for you, for himself." Her gaze was penetrating. But by the time he realized work couldn't fill the empty spaces in his life, certain habits were too ingrained to break easily. I gestured at the stacks of reports and projections. "I can't just walk away. There's too much at stake." "There always will be." She reached across the desk, her slender hand closing over mine. "The company will survive without you for a weekend. Will you survive without anything but the company?" Her question lingered in the air between us, impossible to dismiss with platitudes about dedication or responsibility. "What would you have me do?" I asked finally. "Come home for dinner. Not just tonight, but regularly. Call your friends. Remember there is life outside these walls." She smiled, the familiar creases around her eyes deepening. "Your father's greatest regret wasn't business deals lost or opportunities missed. It was time. With you, with family, with himself." I nodded slowly, then closed my laptop. "I'm ready when you are." Her smile widened. "Good. I invited someone to join us." "Who?" "Dr. Mehta's son, the cardiologist. He's newly divorced and very handsome." "Nani," I groaned, but couldn't suppress a laugh. Some things never changed, even amidst life's biggest upheavals. The weekend. Away from Horizon, my first true break since inheriting the company, proved transformative. I slept past 7 a.m. for the first time in weeks, called college friends I'd been neglecting, even met Nani's cardiologist, who was indeed handsome, though more interested in discussing his vintage car collection than making meaningful conversation. Monday morning, I arrived at the office with clearer eyes. The challenges remained, but my perspective had shifted. This wasn't just my father's company I was saving, it was my life I was building. I called the executive team together with a new proposal: mandatory disconnection periods, no emails after 8 p.m., no weekend work except genuine emergencies, rotating team members for client fires so no one person became indispensable. This isn't just about work-life balance, I explained as skeptical glances circulated. It's about sustainability. Burned-out teams make costly mistakes. We need to model the behavior we want throughout the organization. Vanessa frowned. Richard will use this against us. He'll tell clients we're not committed enough. Let him, I replied. We'll demonstrate that well-rested, whole human beings deliver better results than exhausted workaholics. The policy wasn't universally embraced, but it set a tone. Over the following weeks, I watched tension ease from strained faces. Creative solutions emerged more frequently. Even client feedback improved as teams approached problems with refreshed perspective. 1 month after Richard's departure, we held our quarterly all-hands meeting. The numbers told a compelling story. Despite losing several accounts, our profitability had increased. Client satisfaction scores had risen 18%. Employee retention had stabilized completely. The Klein exodus, as some called it, forced us to re-examine everything, I told the assembled staff. When pressure reveals cracks in a foundation, you can patch them temporarily or rebuild them properly. We chose to rebuild. The room's energy was palpable, not manic enthusiasm, but something steadier. Pride, perhaps. Certainty. We have 2 announcements today, I continued. First, Horizon Solutions has been selected as the exclusive technology transformation partner for Alcorn's global expansion, a 3-year engagement that will be the largest in our company's history. Applause erupted, and I let it wash over us before raising my hand for quiet. The second announcement is more personal. I took a deep breath. As you know, I stepped in as acting president under difficult circumstances. The board has completed its search for a permanent CEO, interviewing external candidates with decades of industry experience. A ripple of unease moved through the crowd. After everything we'd been through, the prospect of another leadership change felt threatening. Yesterday, the board voted unanimously on their selection. I paused, feeling the weight of the moment. They've asked me to accept the permanent position of president and CEO, which I have. The eruption of cheers nearly knocked me backward. Not polite applause, but genuine celebration that echoed off the walls and brought tears to my eyes. As the noise gradually subsided, I noticed Laura approaching the stage with something in her hands. She passed me a small wooden box I recognized immediately, my father's presentation case for special client gifts. Inside was a sleek fountain pen I'd seen countless times throughout my childhood, the one my father had used to sign every major contract in Horizon's history. Its deep blue finish caught the light as I lifted it from the velvet lining. "Your father wanted you to have this when you were ready," Laura whispered. I turned back to the microphone, pen in hand. My father used to say that leadership isn't about having the right answers. It's about asking the right questions. For the past 6 weeks, I've been asking myself whether I could do this job. Today, I'm asking a different question. How can we reimagine what Horizon can become together? The question hung in the air, not rhetorical, but genuinely open. This was no longer about preserving what my father had built or defending against Richard's attacks. It was about writing the next chapter of a story that now belonged to all of us. Later that afternoon, I sat in my office, fully mine now, with my own touches gradually replacing my father's. The vintage typewriters remained, but I'd added my collection of first-edition female authors alongside them. My father's stern portrait had been moved to the conference room, replaced by a photo of the entire Horizon team at our recent volunteer day. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Raj entered, tablet in hand. "We just received this," he said, his expression unreadable as he handed me the device. It was an industry newsletter with a headline that made my breath catch. Globotech acquires Klein Consulting in surprise move. The article detailed how Richard's fledgling firm had been absorbed into the corporate giant for an undisclosed sum. The final paragraph contained a quote from Globotech's CEO. "Klein's expertise will be valuable as we pursue accounts previously, serviced by regional players like Horizon Solutions." I handed the tablet back to Raj. "They're coming after us directly now." He nodded grimly. "Richard knows our playbook, our clients, our vulnerabilities." "And I know Richard," I replied, standing, to look out the window at the city skyline. "He's never understood what makes Horizon different." I turned back to face Raj. "Call the team together. We need to prepare." As he left, I glanced at my father's watch on my wrist, then at the pen Laura had given me. The past and future converged. In this moment of new challenge, Richard thought he'd won by selling to Globotech. He didn't realize he'd just made the fight infinitely more interesting. Globotech's acquisition of Klein Consulting wasn't just a business move, it was a declaration of war. Within days, they launched an aggressive campaign targeting our top 20 clients with steep discounts, expanded service offerings, and the not-so-subtle suggestion that Horizon was a sinking ship. Richard, now Globotech's Vice President of Strategic Acquisitions, led the charge with intimate knowledge of our client relationships and internal operations. They've scheduled meetings with 14 of our major accounts next week, Vanessa reported during our emergency strategy session. The Merchant financial pitch is Monday. Merchant was our third largest client. Losing them would trigger significant layoffs. "What are they offering?" I asked. 30% discount on current services plus their entire technology stack. At implementation cost, Raj answered. "It's predatory pricing designed to bleed us dry." The room fell silent as the gravity of our situation sank in. We couldn't match Globotech's pricing without destroying our margins, and we lacked their vast resources to absorb short-term losses for long-term market dominance. Eleanor Blackwell, who had remained unusually quiet, finally spoke. "This is a familiar play. I've seen it throughout my career. They're not after your clients. They're after your talent." All eyes turned to her. "The discounting is a smokescreen," she continued. "Once they've destabilized your client base, they'll offer positions to your best people. Acquire your intellectual capital without the formal acquisition." David from sales nodded grimly. "She's right. I received a LinkedIn message from a Globotech recruiter yesterday. They're offering a 40% salary increase and signing bonus." My stomach dropped. "How many others have been approached?" "Based on the hallway chatter, at least a dozen so far," Laura supplied from the doorway, where she'd been listening. "Mostly senior consultants and project leads. The very backbone of our delivery capability." "This isn't just about Richard's revenge anymore," I said, rising from my chair. "This is about Globotech eliminating a competitor." "So what do we do?" Raj asked, the frustration evident in his voice. "We can't match their financial offers or their pricing." I walked to the window, watching rain streak down the glass. The gray sky matched our collective mood. For a moment, doubts flooded my mind. Had I been naive to think I could lead Horizon through this? Was I fighting the inevitable? Then my gaze caught on something across the street, a small independent bookstore I'd frequented with my father. It had survived the arrival of national chains, the rise of Amazon, even the shift to ebooks. not by trying to beat the giants at their own game, but by creating an experience they couldn't replicate. "We've been thinking about this all wrong," I said, turning back to the team. "We're trying to defend against Globotech's strategy instead of executing our own." I moved to the whiteboard and drew 3 columns labeled Globotech Strengths, Horizon Strengths, and Battleground. "Globotech can beat us on price, technology breadth, and global reach," I said, listing these in the first column. "We win on client intimacy, specialized expertise, and agility." These went in the second column. In the third column, I wrote a single word: purpose. "Richard and Globotech are playing a financial game," I continued. "They see clients as revenue streams and employees as resources, but we know better. Our clients need partners who understand their business challenges at a fundamental level. Our team needs meaningful work, not just paychecks." I capped the marker decisively. "Let's stop playing defense." The strategy we developed over the next 24 hours abandoned conventional competitive responses. Instead of matching Globotech's discounts, we introduced a new engagement model that aligned our compensation directly with client outcomes. Instead of fearing their recruitment efforts, we created an ownership program that gave every employee equity stakes in Horizon's future. Most radically, we decided to publish our entire client success methodology, the proprietary approach my father had developed over decades as an open-source framework. "You want to give away our secret sauce?" Vanessa asked incredulously when I proposed it. "I want to transform it from a secret to a standard," I corrected. "Globotech can copy our methods, but they can't copy our mindset. When we publish this, we're not just sharing techniques, we're declaring our values." Not everyone agreed with the approach, but after heated debate, the strategy was set. We had 3 days before Globotech's pitch to Merchant Financial. I worked around the clock with our key team members, fueled by determination and too much caffeine. We weren't just preparing a counteroffer, we were reimagining our entire client relationship. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was violating my own mandate against overwork, but some moments truly demanded extraordinary effort. Sunday night, I finally made it home around midnight. As I kicked off my shoes and collapsed onto the couch, my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. "Hello? Maya, it's Catherine Merchant." I sat up straight, instantly alert. Catherine was the CEO of Merchant Financial and a notoriously private executive who rarely engaged directly with vendors. "Catherine, this is unexpected." "I imagine so?" Her voice held a hint of amusement. "I understand Globotech is pitching to my team tomorrow with Richard Klein leading the charge." "That's my understanding as well," I replied cautiously. "Richard called me personally on Friday. Quite a hard sell." She paused. "He mentioned you're struggling to maintain client relationships after your father's passing." The blatant undermining didn't surprise me, but it still stung. "We've had challenges," I acknowledged, deciding honesty was the only viable approach. My father's death was unexpected, and Richard's departure created disruption. But we've stabilized and are growing again. "So I've heard." Another pause. "Your new results-based pricing model is causing quite a stir in my finance department. They love the accountability aspect." I smiled despite my exhaustion. Our strategy was already creating waves. "The reason I'm calling," Catherine continued, "is that I won't be attending tomorrow's presentation." My heart sank. If she was skipping the meeting, it likely meant the decision had already been made in Globotech's favor. "I see," I managed to say, trying to keep disappointment from my voice. "No, I don't think you do," she replied. "I won't be there because I'll be in your office instead. 9 a.m., just you and me." I blinked in surprise. "I'll clear my calendar." "Good. And Maya? Bring that open-source framework documentation your team has been developing. My CTO thinks it could revolutionize how we manage our internal projects." After she hung up, I sat in stunned silence. How had she known about our framework when we hadn't even published it yet? The answer came in a text message moments later, from an unknown number. "You're welcome. Some loyalties run deeper than paychecks. DK." Diane Klein, one last time, had chosen integrity over her ex-husband's schemes. Monday morning, Catherine Merchant spent 3 hours in my office. We didn't discuss service agreements or pricing models. Instead, we talked about the financial industry's evolution, her company's strategic challenges, and how technology could enable human advisors rather than replace them. "You sound like your father," she observed as our conversation wound down. "He always said technology should serve people, not the other way around." "He believed that to his core," I replied. "It's the foundation everything at Horizon is built on." She nodded thoughtfully. "That's what Richard never understood. He sees technology as a way to remove humans from the equation. More efficient, perhaps, but ultimately hollow." As she rose to leave, she handed me a thumb drive. "Our 5-year strategic plan will need a comprehensive proposal by the end of the month." A small smile. "And please inform your team that the Globotech meeting has been canceled." Word of Merchant Financial's expanded engagement with Horizon spread quickly through the industry. 3 other clients who had been wavering reaffirmed their commitments within days. The momentum shift was palpable. Richard, predictably, escalated his efforts. Anonymous negative reviews of Horizon appeared on industry websites. Rumors circulated about our financial stability. 2 more employees left for Globotech's lucrative offers. But something unexpected was happening simultaneously. Applications to work at Horizon tripled. Industry veterans reached out about partnership opportunities. Our published framework was downloaded over 10,000 times in its first week. By focusing on our purpose rather than our competitors' moves, we'd changed the nature of the game entirely. 6 months after my father's death, Horizon held its annual company retreat. Traditionally a somber strategy affair under Richard's influence, we reimagined it as a celebration of both accomplishments and possibilities. Standing on the stage before the entire company, now grown to 165 employees despite Globotech's persistent efforts, I felt a sense of completion. Not because our challenges were over, but because we had found our path forward. 6 months ago, many wondered if Horizon could survive. I began. Some predicted we'd collapse without my father's leadership. Others said we'd crumble when our executive team supposedly resigned en masse. Knowing laughter rippled through the audience. Those predictions weren't just wrong. They were based on a fundamental misunderstanding of what makes this company special. Horizon isn't defined by any single leader, methodology, or client list. It's defined by our collective commitment to doing work that matters. I gestured to the screens behind me, where images of our recent projects appeared. A healthcare system transformation that improved patient outcomes, a supply chain redesign that reduced environmental impact, a financial inclusion initiative, bringing services to underserved communities. This is Horizon's true legacy. Not market share or profit margins, but positive impact. This is what my father understood that Richard never did. This is what Globotech can't replicate with any amount of money or technology. As I concluded my remarks, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for my father's wisdom, for the team's resilience, and for the unexpected journey that had brought me here. The challenges weren't over. Globotech remained a formidable competitor. Richard continued his vendetta. The business landscape kept evolving at a relentless pace. But Horizon was no longer just my father's company that I had inherited. It had become something new, shaped by his vision, but transformed by our collective purpose. And I was no longer simply Nikhil Patel's daughter stepping reluctantly into his shoes. I was Maya Patel, President and CEO of Horizon Solutions. The company's future wasn't a burden I carried alone, but a path we forged together. That evening, at the retreat's closing dinner, I slipped away briefly to the hotel's terrace. The sunset painted the sky in brilliant orange and purple, the kind of display my father would have appreciated. I took out his watch, running my fingers over its worn face one more time before carefully placing it in a small velvet box I'd brought, specifically for this purpose. It would always remain a treasured keepsake, but I no longer needed to wear it daily as a talisman. The door opened behind me, and Nani stepped onto the terrace, her elegant sari catching the fading light. "Your team is looking for you," she said. "The young developers have prepared some kind of surprise presentation." I smiled. "I'll be right in." She noticed the watch box in my hands and nodded with understanding. "It's time, isn't it?" "Yes," I replied simply. "It's time." As we walked back inside together, the warmth of celebration enveloped us. These were no longer just employees to me, nor was I simply their boss. We were companions on a journey that had only just begun. The manager who once threatened that everyone would quit if I became president now worked for our largest competitor, still trying to prove he'd been right. But the empty chairs he'd predicted had instead become new seats at an expanding table, filled with people drawn to purpose over profit. My father's unexpected death had thrust me into a role I hadn't sought. But the true inheritance wasn't the company. It was the understanding that leadership isn't about position or power. It's about creating spaces where people can do their best work for reasons that matter. That was the legacy I would build on, the foundation I would expand, the torch I would carry forward, not just as Nikhil Patel's daughter, but as myself. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.